say really easy, but it's a series of pathways. There's 3 separate pathways: glycolysis, citric acid cycle, or Krebs cycle. Have you guys ever heard of Krebs cycle? Okay, so some of you brand new, foreign, sounds like alien, and some of you, what? I already know Krebs cycle. It's Krebs cycle, and the 3rd pathway is called the electron transport chain. Okay, so we're going to go over these kind of and see what's happening in each of those phases. We don't have to know all the enzymes. We don't have to know all the steps. We don't have to know all the nitty-gritty. But in general, I want you to know that when we're breaking down things like glucose or even fats, like fatty acids, we end up putting them through these pathways: glycolysis, Krebs cycle, and ETC, or electron transport chain. So glucose is burned or broken down very slowly in a series of steps like this, so that all the ATP can sort of be gradually made, so all the energy isn't lost as heat. So if we did it real quick, boom, just split it, generated it, used the oxygen, made ATP, we wouldn't get as much bang for our buck, because that reaction would generate a whole crap load of heat. So instead, your cells and your metabolism and all your enzymes have evolved all these intricate pathways where they do it in these series of slow, discrete steps. So by the end, you get a ton of ATP molecules for that one molecule of sugar. So you can really harness the energy, all the maximum energy that's possible. So glycolysis happens in the cytoplasm. So if we talk about the cytoplasm of a cell, it's all of this. Here's the actual whole entire cell, say, and then there's your mitochondria, which are these little, they look like little kidney beans, sort of. They've got a double layered membrane, and they've got cristae, these folds, these membrane folds that go all throughout. The cytosol, or the cytoplasm, is right here. It's everything outside of the nucleus. This is all the nucleus, and the DNA is contained in the nucleus. Cytosol is all out here. Mitochondria, these guys are really important for metabolism, for aerobic respiration. Okay? So that's sort of the parceling out of where that happens. Glycolysis, there's enzymes that are out here, just out in the cytosol, the cytoplasm of your cells, that actually convert glucose into a 3-carbon sugar called pyruvate, and then it generates some of these energy electron carriers, hydrogen carriers called NADH, and it only generates a little bit of ATP. Okay, so take home here. We start breaking down or burning sugar, glucose, in the cytoplasm of our cells. This is a quick and dirty process, only giving me 2 ATP. That's kind of crap, okay? For lack of a biochemical word. Glycolysis, first step of breaking down glucose, happens in the cytoplasm, only generates a little bit of ATP too. And these electron carriers, these guys are going to come in handy later. Now the Krebs cycle, this pyruvate, you split glucose in half, and now it's 2 3-carbon little sugars, actually funnels right into the mitochondria. So this pyruvate goes into the mitochondria. And into the mitochondria, it actually goes through a series of steps. It's a cycle of an enzymatic pathway or metabolic pathway where this gets converted to that, gets converted to that, all by different enzymes in a whole circle or cycle called the Krebs cycle or the citric acid cycle. So pyruvate gets converted, it enters the Krebs cycle, acetyl-CoA releases CO2, 2 more ATP, and an NADH, which carries electrons, okay? Fats and proteins can also enter the Krebs cycle. So this is not just preferential for glucose, that's the main one being metabolized and broken down. But you can also feed your fats and proteins into the Krebs cycle, okay? So mental note, keep that there. Those can be broken down. The whole point is you get a little bit more, now you get CO2, you get a little bit more energy, a little more ATP, and you get a little more electron carriers. Continuing in the mitochondria, this is happening in the mitochondria. This is happening in the mitochondria, okay? The electron transport chain and oxidative phosphorylation, that's a fancy word for making crap loads of ATP, okay? You can even write that. Making crap loads of ATP is oxidative phosphorylation. These are the final steps that in the mitochondria allow your enzymes, your mitochondria, and your proteins to really make a whole bunch of ATP. A series of complexes pass electrons, oxygen that you breathe in from your lungs and goes throughout your blood into all your cells. Oxygen is the final electron acceptor. So electrons get passed from one series of complexes to the next. And then ultimately oxygen combines with hydrogens from those NADHs that were carrying electrons. There are these little shuttles, and it becomes water. It forms water. So ultimately, you need oxygen in this step. This step is in the mitochondria, okay? and it ultimately uses the oxygen and the electrons that were passed through the chain to make about 32 ATP. Okay, so we made 2 ATP here, we made 2 ATP here, and we made 32 ATP here, using the mitochondria. And keep note, that's what I want you. Mitochondria, this is where that's happening with all the key enzymes that are necessary, and then this is happening in the cytoplasm. Ultimately, your mitochondria, this is just one mitochondria doing metabolism of just one sugar molecule, you get ultimately 32 ATP. So actually 34, 36. One molecule of glucose can give you 36 molecules of ATP, or 36 ATPs.
We got to 32.
32 at the final, that final step, electron transport chain. But if you go Krebs cycle, it makes 2. And glycolysis, the first part where you first break down glucose, 2. So ultimately, we're feeding glucose into your cells, they're taking in sugar, and they're sending them through these metabolic pathways. We're getting 2 ATP here, we're going into the mitochondria, we're splitting it down further, we're getting 2 more. Then we're sending it to the inner part of the mitochondria, where now oxygen comes into play, and electron carriers come into play, and it's popping out a whole ton, 32. So ultimately, it's closer to 36, okay, for one glucose. This is just showing the picture of where these are happening. Blood capillary, glucose comes out, diffuses through the interstitial space, comes through carriers that are in membranes of the cell. So we're looking at one individual cell. Say this is your muscle, like a skeletal muscle fiber. Glucose comes in, it gets broken down into pyruvate. That's called glycolysis. Here we just get 2 ATP. Oh, no, it's not written right there, it's all right. We get 2 ATPs, just real quick, first step. Then this pyruvate goes into your mitochondria.
The Krebs cycle.
Yes, and it goes into the Krebs cycle, citric acid cycle. Generates some CO2. What do you exhale when you breathe and you're exercising a lot? You're exhaling CO2. That's where it's being made, right? CO2, some electron carriers are made, a little bit of ATP2 are made. These go further and transfer to the electron transport chain. And all these little gadgets set up in the inner part of these folds of the mitochondria, where they have lots of these key enzymes and proteins, these change out a whole ton of ATP. 32 ATP ultimately from the electron transport chain. I abbreviate it as like etc., ETC. Okay, I just call that like etc. But basically through this whole process, that one sugar molecule that you ate in a starchy potato that your body broke down into all these individual monosaccharides goes in and you get 36 ultimate energy molecules from consuming that sugary substance. I have a little video. Why don't I skip ahead? Do I have like 2 minutes to show this video that puts it all together?
We have 1 minute.
We have 1 minute. Let's see how long this is. I'll just start on this. I'll start it just so you can see it all kind of coming together. I feel like a visual makes this even more approachable. If it'll work. Yeah, it's not working. So it was working. I tested all these.
Where do you want the homework paper?
And actually, you can play all these movies. If you guys pull up the PowerPoint slides, like on your computer, you can put them in presentation mode and you can play them. So they're all embedded in there. I'll play this next time. Let's end right there. That's enough biochemistry for one day. We'll come back to this. This is why we had to spend time on the macromolecules and the chemistry and biology, because to understand how these things are broken down, you gotta use those. Oh yeah, application questions. Sorry, I forgot about that. If you already didn't do it, I got some of yours already. If you did it, I'll take those. Keep your cards, write on your cards, write on it later if you want. And you're probably all gonna say metabolism and glycolysis, the Krebs cycle. We'll spend more time on this so you'll get it.
Thank you so much.
Yes, you're welcome. Thank you. Okay, have a good day. I'll see you guys.